little spark plug, yeah.
But he was right now. He's been learning the game. The fourth line guy who's going to spunk it up for you and kill some penalties for you, maybe in the second half of the season.
Oh yeah,
Little things,
and that's that type of stuff I agree with.
Trotz just doesn't get it when it comes to young players at times. He's forced to play some young players because if he didn't, then this team would only be playing 8 forwards and 4 defensemen. Of course, he only plays 4D half the time anyway.
All right, once you hear your music, you'll know that you're live. Then after the music or during it, you can start the talking.
Excellent.
When there's 10 seconds left, we'll start talking.
Okay, cool.
That's wonderful.
We are sports text.
Uh-huh. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Experience Hockey Talk, serious hockey talk for serious hockey fans. I'm Michael, he's Bernie, and we are here at the new WBGR studio. New desk, well, the screen's still the same, so that's still the same. New microphones.
The WBGR Sports Center here with Michael and Bernie. And almost the sports desk is fantastic. As always, thank you to Lionel Green, the proprietor of WBGR Network, for giving us the platform to talk some puck over the next 60 action-packed minutes.
The only thing we're missing is a Dixon with a soundboard right here.
Well,
to make fun of him.
Well, Dixon's got a nice soundboard, and he's a tremendous asset to the team. So definitely props to making us sound as good as we can. So
Dixon always tries to mute my mic as much as possible.
Indeed.
But, starting off, we took last weekend off for Thanksgiving weekend. So real quick, how was your Thanksgiving, Bernie?
It was good until about 48 hours ago when I got hit with a 24-hour bug that I rarely get hit with. But other than that, it was good, low-key and all that. How was Lindenbaum Thanksgiving 2017?
Well, I worked on Thanksgiving morning. Oh, Shaggy's in North Carolina. That's why you're not playing in the tournament tomorrow. Okay, that explains a lot. I worked my ESPN gig. It was originally listed as Mad Men Mowers, so I thought it was a bunch of guys on lawnmowers racing around, which would have been hilarious. It ended up being college basketball, so it's like, you take what you get.
Works.
Make a little money and have a little fun.
You never know what gets sponsored with what nowadays, between the bowl games in football and the basketball tournaments before the conference starts in basketball. They come up, have every sponsor known to man sponsoring an 18 tournament. So.
Like even the people at the job were confused because they're like, yeah, it's probably just like lawnmower racing or something. And I was like,
the Ocho.
It's like, yeah, at one point I thought it was going to be ESPN 8 the Ocho. Well, actually, it's funny that you bring that up, and we'll get to the hockey soon, but
even though it's a hockey show.
Yeah, even though it's a hockey show. The funny thing is that ESPN actually did bring in the Ocho for one day. They turned ESPN University into ESPN 8 the Ocho, and I'm just like, this is awesome.
It was a great. I saw a couple hours of it. And
some of the people that I worked with actually work the channel online, so I was just like, that's awesome. But
good stuff indeed.
But you mentioned 48 hours ago you're not feeling well. You're feeling kind of sick. Which is a shame because, 48 hours ago, also the Washington Capitals took on the Los Angeles Kings during our break. Mm-hmm. They went on a 3-game winning streak, which included victories over the top team in the NHL, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and another top team in the Toronto Maple Leafs. However, the Capitals fell to a rejuvenated Los Angeles Kings team. It was really just a 9-second spurt in the second period that undid the Washington Capitals in that game.
Yeah, the King game, and look all the way back to they've had their peaks and valleys over this last 6-7 game stretch, with starting with the Minnesota game on the 18th, and then laying the egg against Calgary, but then, like you said, coming back strong with great wins against a struggling Ottawa team who just broke a 7-game losing streak last night in Brooklyn, and then taking on Tampa Bay and Toronto on back-to-back nights, and we know how great they've been on back-to-backs, but they came out and they actually had more juice in their tank than the Maple Leafs that night. They both had back-to-backs as well. I think Toronto played Carolina the night before on that one. So to be able to show and get on top of a Maple Leaf team that prides itself on its speed game was definitely a good feather in the cap, especially after coming off a complete effort against Tampa Bay. You take out about, I'd say, 22 minutes out of the 120 they've played 120 plus since the first game in overtime. They've played Tampa Bay. They've dominated the Lightning. They're the one team I don't think Tampa Bay wants to see. I said that a couple of years ago when Caps had the Game 7 with Pittsburgh, and if they gotten through to Tampa Bay, I was very confident they were going to roll through Tampa Bay. For some reason, Tampa has this stigma when they play Washington. It's Washington has their number in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and Tampa has always been one of those very interesting teams come the playoffs for the Washington Capitals. Obviously, the last time the Capitals won a series in less than 7 games was against the New York Rangers when they won in 5, which I was actually at Game 5 when they won that series. The very next series, they ended up getting swept by the Tampa Bay Lightning for 2 reasons. 1, overlooked the Tampa Bay Lightning, and number 2, injuries.
Yeah, number 2 was the biggest reason why they got swept. When you're playing a Guy Boucher team that loved that 1-3-1 trap, especially with the talent he had at that time, and your best puck-moving defenseman after Game 1 of that series is Sean Collins, from not the left winger they brought in a couple years ago, but former Ohio State defenseman Sean Collins. That meant Carlson got hurt in Game 1, Green got hurt at the end of the Rangers series, and Dennis Weidman had that freak injury in the back of his leg it was a skate or something. It was like a vein issue that cost him right after they had acquired him from the deadline. The Caps had themselves positioned very well to make a deep run, having the depth defensively, but within a matter of 6 weeks, they had one of the deepest defenses in the Eastern Conference to practically bare bones on the blue line, which led to a swift and hasty departure, but that's the past. I'm looking forward to more great playoff action this year, hopefully with better results.
Yeah, and now going back to the game against Los Angeles, there was that 9-second spurt in the second period that undid the Washington Capitals. The Kings were able to score 2 goals. But overall, the Caps were playing very well in that game, minus that 9-second spurt, and then minus really the last minute of the game, when they tried pulling the goalie and getting the tie of the game. But when you look at the Los Angeles Kings, they fired Daryl Sutter over the summer. They fired Dean Lamborti as the general manager over the summer. They brought in Rob Blake as the new general manager. They promoted John Stevens as the new head coach. John Stevens has revitalized guys like Dustin Brown and Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty. It's kind of weird saying that he's revitalized Drew Doughty because everyone's like, well, Drew Doughty's a defenseman and he's always been really good. Well, the thing is, though, is that when John Stevens came in, Daryl Sutter had a defense-first system. And for guys like an Anze Kopitar, that stymied their play a bit. Now, under John Stevens, he's opened up the play, and he's made it where guys can play more of their game. It's why we see Dustin Brown actually earning the contract that he signed years ago.
Well, you also think Kopitar might have been dealing with an injury last year that wasn't disclosed at all throughout the season, even in the offseason, for his production to go down as drastic as it did. He only scored like 7 or 8 goals last year, and he had that in less than 20 games this year. He was able to find a way to find that offense in that defensive system. I mean, Sutter has offensive tendencies in his system, but John Stevens brought some speed, more of a speed type of tendency back to the LA Kings. I mean, you saw on Thursday night when Dustin Brown had a couple of his trademark Dustin Brown clean hits. I mean, Orpik led, I think, Carlson out the dry on one. I was just like, I just shake my head. I mean, Orpik is liability in hockey right now, but it shows that you just tweak a couple things and you're open to putting some young blood like Adrian Kempe into the lineup in good spots, your team can turn around. Plus, not having Jonathan Quick for 3/4 of the season last year didn't help the Kings' cause. They're right back on top with a very hungry expansion team nipping at their heels.
Oh yeah, and their goaltending is starting to get a little healthy now. They got Malcolm Subban back in net for them. So
yeah, but they are finding it a little tougher on the road. I mean, they're one of the best teams at home in the NHL. I think they've only lost once in regulation. I think it was just this past week to Dallas at home. They're definitely making things tough when people come to Sin City. So we'll see where everything shakes out, because obviously everyone plays 41 on the road and 41 at home. But for the Caps is concerned, we're trying to figure out what they are looking for. I mean, everything's starting to get healthy. They're going to have to make another roster move, which leads us to Nathan Walker being claimed by the Edmonton Oilers.
Yep.
And mixed emotions on that. I mean, granted, he wasn't like you mentioned off before we started the show. He's not a top 6 guy, but he's one of those guys. Honestly, he's one of the few guys that I've seen this season, when he's been in all 7 games of them, that actually tries to stir something up. He's like that Andrew Shaw, Brendan Gallagher type of player where he gets in your face. Not the biggest, but he's got some speed to his game, and he's got a little bit of griminess to his game. Just being that little water bug, it just gets involved in people's business when they just trying to shoo him away like a stink bug or something.
Oh yeah, and but the other thing is that, and I was actually mentioning this to Dixon in the car, you also kind of get rid of the publicity stunt that also was the first-year Australian-born player in the NHL. And one example that I brought up was back in the early 90s, the Pittsburgh Penguins had Jim Peake, who was the first Korean-born NHL player. And there was no, I have his hockey cards and stuff like that, but there was never a major publicized thing about him, not in the newspapers, not really in anything. But also back in the early 90s, different type of era with what the social media that we have today, and I think a big thing is that especially with social media, we've seen the Brow Rangers turn into the TJ Yoshis and stuff like that, and it's there's a lot of bandwagoning that goes on, and when Nathan Walker comes up and it's hey, we have this kid, you kind of latch on to him like it's a major publicity thing. You kind of lose that a little bit, and you can now kind of focus more on the hockey again, in a way.
Well, I think
but at the same time, the guy's a fourth-line guy who does all the things that you said that is necessary, that is needed on a team at the same time.
Well, I think a lot of that publicity on stuff died down once he played his first game and got his first goal and got that all out of the way. I just believe as well that the Caps put themselves in a little bit of a roster crunch instead of being able to see what some of these young guys have by signing an Alex Chason off of his PTO. Really hasn't brought much to the team. I'm befuddled on why he is out there when you pull the goalie less than 3 minutes left in the game and he's one of the 6 attackers instead of a Tom Wilson or a Jacob Vrana. It blows my mind that he's getting this ice time. I mean, I understand him getting, and he's getting second power play time over Tom Wilson. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that, but at this, and it's interesting because we talk about guys with PTOs. One guy who we're hoping to see 48 hours ago ended up getting his contract terminated on Sunday, and that was Brooks Laich. So it is possible to, if the Caps have to, especially with Andre Burakovsky coming back this month, because he is skating now, could maybe a potential waiver move with intention to terminate contract be in play for an Alex Chason? Because his type of contract is the contract that you can do it to.
Yeah, they're looking at about, I think they're $50,000 over the cap when Burakovsky's eligible to come back. That's one move they could make, or they could try to get Tyler Gravac through waivers. I think they have better time getting him through waivers than he did trying to get Walker through waivers. I think going to Edmonton is going to be a great thing for Nathan Walker because of that speed element that
they're lacking.
David brings, but like you said, there isn't much other speed. They gutted it when they let go, when they traded Jordan Eberle. They thought Ryan Strome was going to bring that speed element, and he hasn't shown quite what he's doing. And conversely, Jordan Eberle is one of the reasons why the Islanders are scoring a ton of goals now, because it balances their lineup a lot
Well,
better.
there's also an interesting note about Everly, which we'll talk about later. But an interesting thing, like Walker brings speed. It's been known that, like we've talked about before, we're talking about it now, and then Shaggy, we'll get to your comment in a moment. The, outside of Connor McDavid, outside of Leon Draisaitl, and maybe Adam Larson, there's not a lot of speed on that team, and that's one of the biggest reasons why Edmonton has not had the season that everyone's been expecting them to have. Not only that, but Edmonton is also learning that it's harder to play up to expectations than it is to be playing with no expectations, because last season they had no expectations to make the playoffs, and then they make it to the second round. Now the expectations are much higher on them. Same with the Toronto Maple Leafs. A lot of people didn't expect them to make the playoffs last season. They made it to the first round. Now the expectations are higher on them. So both of those young teams are now learning how to play with those expectations. And Toronto's doing well, Edmonton not doing so well.
Well, then they just lost Adam Larson. He just got put on injury reserve, so the speed just got taken down another tick or two. So, but you see other teams that are making moves that are fortifying themselves with their speed game and actually bringing in other elements. We'll talk about that later because there's a big trade in the NHL on Thursday that we definitely want to touch on.
Yes.
But with Toronto got off the schneid and everything. They got a great effort in November, which we'll talk about with Frederik Andersen later. But yeah, everyone's going to speed game. And look, would you believe on December 2nd, you could say that the Winnipeg Jets are tied for the most points in the NHL right now. Why? Because of their speed and the top-end skill they got. And they added a Kyle Connor to that mix. Ehlers is scoring. Line was going through a slump until last night. He had 3 points last night. They put a 7 spot up. This team is rolling with all the right cylinders, and they're getting solid goals. Connor Hellebuck just needs to be solid. He can steal a game every so often. All he needs to do is be solid, and Winnipeg's going to be firmly in that playoff hunt come April.
Yeah. And then real quick, we're going to take this comment to the break. Our good friend Shaggy, just seems a shame that we bring in Walker for 2 developmental camps and then trade up to draft him in the 3rd round and then lose him for nothing.
Great point.
Good, very good point, Shaggy. And keep in mind, if Edmonton eventually gets to a point where they want to send Walker down to the minors, he does have to get put on waivers, so there's always the chance he can get claimed back.
And I'll bring up when Chris Bourque made the team, I think it was 09, 10, 11, and Fleischman was hurt with that vein. He had that vein thrombosis that come up, and he was going to go on LTIR, but George McPhee messed up the cap. Had to put Chris Bourque on waivers. He got claimed by the Penguins. Eventually, the Penguins, like you mentioned, put him back on waivers. The Caps reclaimed him, and since they reclaimed him, could put him down in Hershey without him going through waivers. And Chris Bourque became the MVP of the league in the playoffs that year, and they went on like a 21-game undefeated streak when Bourque came back. Hershey Giant Center became crazy. That's how good Chris Bourque was down there and still is, and I'll mention that in a bit. But so we'll go to break on that. So if Nathan Walker does go back on waivers, don't be surprised if he isn't donning that number 12 in chocolate colors again very soon.
Yep. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back from a quick commercial break. We're so going to be talking about the Gouda suspension because there is so many things wrong with that suspension.
Well, that's so long ago.
I know, but
there's so much we got the trade to talk about.
We'll talk about the trade, and we'll break down the trade, and we'll break down 3 stars. But at the same time, they screwed up that suspension.
I completely disagree with you on that.
What about that cross-check that I had by Perot that started everything?
It wasn't a cross-check. He freaking was trying to push off of him. The stick went up. He could probably call it a high stick on him, but that wasn't a cross-check. You've got to control your stick, though. It was I don't know. But it's crazy. All these guys have goals, and I was looking up guys that don't have a goal. You mentioned Troy Bauer doesn't have a goal in 25 games for Calgary.
Oops.
Here's the most surprising one. Duncan Keith. Yep, I saw that earlier. Duncan Keith, no goals for Chicago this year.
Yet.
Oh, he'll score, but that's pretty surprising. First quarter of the season, you don't have a goal.
Yeah. We'll start off with this real quick to knock this out of the way.
Yes, absolutely. 8 of them.
Bonder won it a couple of years ago.
He did.
Listen for the cue. Don't. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Experience Hockey Talk, serious hockey talk for serious hockey fans. And we left off with the Caps potentially, you never know how waivers work. Potentially, maybe getting Nathan Walker back if the case happens. But we're going to lead in with some hockey news, not just NHL, but hockey news. It was announced that the International Ice Hockey Federation Hall of Fame class of 2018 will feature Rob Blake, Chris Chelios, Daniel Alfredsson, and Yuri Lettinen among 8 other who are among 8 people voted into the IIHF Hall of Fame. Blake, who is the current general manager of the Los Angeles Kings, as we mentioned in the last segment, played 20 seasons in the NHL with the Kings, Colorado Avalanche, and San Jose Sharks, winning his Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche. Internationally, he helped Canada win the gold medal at the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics. And then Chris Chelios is a 6-time All-Star, is 6 all-time in NHL games played with 1,651 in 26 seasons with the Montreal Canadiens, Chicago Blackhawks, Detroit Red Wings, and Atlanta Thrashers. He won the Stanley Cup with the Canadiens in 1986 and with the Detroit Red Wings in 2002 and 2008 and won the Norris Trophy 3 times. Daniel Alfredsson played 17 of his 18 NHL seasons with the Ottawa Senators, his other season with the Detroit Red Wings. And Yuri Lettinen spent his 14-season NHL career with the Dallas Stars, finishing with 514 points in 875 games. He won silver medal with Finland in the 2006 Torino Olympics, as well as a bronze in 1994, 98, and 2010. And one major note about this Hall of Fame: this Hall of Fame features Peter Bondra, who was inducted a few years ago.
Absolutely. Bondra, not only with his accolades as a Washington Capital, but also a Slovakian national team, putting them on the map where the Stastny brothers started the foundation. Peter Bondra took them to the next level, and also being the Slovakian general manager, I think, in 2010.
Yep. He made him he put him in the bronze medal game. Indeed. As general manager, and a lot of people were saying that Slovakia would probably end up 7th or 8th place in the Olympic tournament, but no, Peter Bondra built a really great team that...
Well, when you have a Peter Bondra building the team, you have a 6'9" Redwood as your number one defenseman. It definitely helps matters a lot, especially playing on more of a smaller ice surface, being in Canada. They didn't play on the larger ice surface that they did in the international ranks, but... I think Yuri Lettinen, they just honored him with the Dallas Stars. Actually, the Stars are still wearing the trademark gold laces that he would always wear when he skated out. One of the best two-way forwards to play the game. Always was in the Selke conversation. I think he won it a couple times. Rob Blake, great defenseman, tremendous shot. Chris Chelios, Mr. Reliable, played till he's 800 years old.
Almost literally.
It was like 47, 48 before he...
No, he was 48 years old when he retired from the Atlanta Thrashers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Daniel Alfredsson, who's Mr. Ottawa Senator. Class act all the way through. Definitely nothing but great things to say. And the good thing also about the IIHF Hall of Fame is they always recognize one player in the non-power countries. I think he was from Denmark this year. Played 17 years with the Danish national team, and they always honor different countries' players as well, so they don't just focus on the big countries, the Power Six, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and then real quick before we go into other news, we also had some injuries. Calgary Flames forward Chris Versteeg will have hip surgery on Monday and is considered out indefinitely. He was placed on injury reserve Wednesday after missing 2 games with the injury, which occurred November 24th against the Dallas Stars. But then also the Blackhawks placed Corey Crawford on injury reserve on Friday because of an undisclosed injury. So he is going to be out for a while, and then Anton Forsberg will likely start for the Blackhawks when they play the Dallas Stars. Man, we're talking about the Dallas Stars a lot right now.
Yeah.
At American Airlines Center tonight at 9 p.m., which will be on NBC Sports Network.
Well, think about this. I mean, last night Columbus played Corpus Solid.
Oh, no, NBC Sports Chicago, my bad.
So tonight the Caps will see Bob. But then the next two games, they play San Jose at home and Chicago at home. Aaron Dell has been toting the load for San Jose recently with Martin Jones being out the injury, and then Forsberg will probably be, or JF Berube might be in goal for Chicago on Wednesday night rivalry night against the Capitals. So, and then of course they end up the 5-game homestand with the Rangers, so a couple of division games. But you're going to see a couple of second string goaltenders instead of the first stringers that are perennial all-stars for their team. So. Not like it's going to be an easy fight, because the 18 guys in front of them are going to play their butts off for them. Usually when you put the backup in there, 9 times out of 10, that you get a more spirited effort from your team in front of you.
And then, of course, we had, with November ending, December starting, you had the Stars of the Month, headlined by Nathan MacKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche, but we'll start with the third star, which was Braden Shen, center of the St. Louis Blues. Braden Shen recorded 7 goals, 12 assists for 19 points in 12 games, an average of 1.58 points per game to propel the Blues to a 7-5-0 November and the top of the Western Conference standings. He had 5 multi-point performances, headlined by a pair of career-high 4-point efforts, November 4th versus Toronto, on November 20, and then on November 21st versus Edmonton. Two of those teams that we're talking about that have all those high expectations on them right now.
You don't think the Philadelphia Flyers miss Braden Shen at all, do you? I mean, that team, to plug him in with Jaden Schwartz and Vladimir Tarasenko on that top line in St. Louis has made that team a much better, complete team. And, he's already shown what he can do on the power play. He tied for league leading power play goals last year in Philly. So, that trade's very one-sided right now in St. Louis's favor. Yori Laterra done next to nothing in Philly. So, St. Louis, Doug Armstrong, really well done. One of the best trades, one-sided-wise, in the offseason this past year. So, but number 2, reason why the Toronto Maple Leafs had got back off the mat and back into the upper echelon of the teams in the East is Frederik Andersen. 9-2-1 with a 2.14 goals against in the month of November.
With a .938 save percentage and 2 shutouts to guide the Maple Leafs to a 10-4-1 November. He allowed 2 or fewer goals in 8 of his 12 appearances, highlighted by consecutive shutouts November 16th versus New Jersey. Hey, that's the day I went up to New Jersey. And November 18th at Montreal. So Andersen made 40-plus saves 3 other times during the month, which was November 22nd at Florida, November 24th at Carolina, and November 30th at Edmonton.
Yep, and he did not face the Washington Capitals. He faced the Carolina Hurricanes the night before on that back-to-back deal for Toronto, or it might have been Florida. I think they're in Carolina. But Chris McElhinney got to experience a very special night with Alex Ovechkin's hat trick. With Hockey Fights Cancer month coming to an end, and Alex Louis, and everyone saw that story and everything. We might cover that.
We're going to cover that in a moment, because
but Nathan
I have an interesting note about that Elliot Freeman brought up about that game.
Yeah,
but we'll talk about that in a moment.
But speaking of the Caps, I think the number 1 star had a banner night against the Caps, which led to him being the first star of the month.
And that is Nathan MacKinnon, center of the Colorado Avalanche. MacKinnon registered 5 goals, 15 assists for 20 points in 12 games, leading the NHL with a 1.67 points per game and a +11 rating to power the Avalanche to a 6-4-2 November. He posted 7 multi-point games, highlighted by career-high 5-point game November 16th versus the Washington Capitals. The first 5-point performance by a Colorado player since Milan Hajduk, who did 6 points, and Paul Stastny, who had 5 points, each achieved the feat December 9th, 2007. MacKinnon added 2 overtime goals in his final 5 contests of the month as well, equaling his total from his first 318 NHL games.
But we mentioned on the show 2 weeks ago, when we talked about the trade with Duchesne and Duchesne going to Ottawa, it was going to give Nathan MacKinnon and Gabriel Landeskog more opportunities. And withstanding Gabriel's sitting a little suspension out right now, but when they're both on the ice together and that Capital game, they were dominant. They were flying all over the place. I mean, they caught the Caps on back-to-back on every other night. I mean, 2 games and 3 nights on the road. 2 of their worst performances of the year. But part credit goes to Colorado jumping on them early, 17 seconds in, and continuing to just onslaught them. And Nathan McKinnon taking that next step. I mean, you got to think eventually it was going to click again. I mean, he hangs around Sidney Crosby so much during the offseason up in Cole Harbor.
Yep. And then, going back to, what was the point before Nathan McKinnon?
We were talking about the Hockey Fights Cancer Month.
Yes. So Elliot Friedman made a very interesting comment. Toronto Maple Leafs were the only team out of all 31 to not do a ceremonial puck drop before the start of the game.
Wow, that's cool.
Even with the whole Alex Louis story with Alex Ovechkin and the Capitals. The Capitals hosted a Hockey Fights Cancer guest. But Toronto also ended up be outside the practice jerseys, really did nothing for Hockey Fights Cancer.
Well, I mean...
Isn't that a little interesting?
Well, they should send a Christmas card to the Washington Capitals for making that Hockey Fights Cancer night a special night at the ACC. But just all together, the whole month of November, Michael, it just was tremendous. All the different stories you get to hear, and very emotional night in St. Louis last night with Ari Dugan, the 11-year-old that followed around the Blues and tragically passed away several months ago. So they did they had nice purple jersey, but it was it was designed somewhat by Ari before she passed. It was glitter and colorful numbers, and it was just a very emotional night at St. Louis. Darren Pang had a very spirited speech during the first intermission, talking about his mother as well as Dave Strader, and I could only imagine there wasn't a dry eye in the place between the Ari Dugan thing and Darren Pang's speech. Granted, the Kings went in and capped off a really nice back-to-back by beating the Blues after beating the Caps the night before, but what the NHL has been it's one of the things the NHL has hit a grand slam with is the whole Hockey Fights Cancer Month, and they just keep topping themselves every year with what they are doing, and also the money that are raising. Of course, the one big thing that we mentioned earlier in the month that would put it even further over the top is to wear those jerseys during the game and have them auctioned off as game worn.
I definitely know that the goalies definitely wear those masks throughout the entire game, and the players will have the tape on the sticks throughout the entire game.
Carter Hutton's mask had 400 names on it last night of cancer survivors or people that were, I forget which way it was, but that mask was flooded with names on it, and that's why hockey players are such a class act. You rarely hear them in the news, unlike the other 3 major sports with
steroid suspensions
or legal issues.
It's actually funny because Dixon and I were talking about in the car ride up about the substance abuse program, because we're talking about Zach Cassian in Edmonton and how. After he had his, car accident after he got traded to Montreal, and then he goes through the substance abuse program, gets traded to Edmonton, and has really turned his career and life around in Edmonton. The conversation came around how many players have you heard been suspended due to the substance abuse program? The answer to that question is 3 in 13 years or 14 years that it's been around. 3 players. In the NFL, you hear about it all the time. In baseball, you hear about it all the time. Basketball, not so much. But you hear about more off-court issues happening there. You hear about off-field issues with the NFL all the time. So it's kind of interesting how hockey is, where it's you only had 3 suspensions.
Well, you think also, you mentioned basketball as well. Remember, hockey and basketball, unlike baseball and football, they send their guys to international competition as well, where they're very stringent with their drug testing policy. So we could put that as one of the contributing factors on why those 2 sports are very good with their record when it concerns to performance-enhancing deals.
Except if you're the Olympics and you're Nicholas Backstrom and you're taking allergy medicine because pollen is a horrible, horrible thing.
Like I said, it's stringent. I didn't say it was consistent. It was stringent.
but they resolved the issue. They went, no, he can have his silver medal.
Yes.
So, but hopping over real quick before we go to the break, because there's stuff that we want to tackle. There's a Jacob Vrana note that I want to tackle. Even though you and I disagree on it, I want to tackle the Gudis suspension because it also leads into the Landeskog and Paquette suspensions.
Oh, the Paquette suspension! I'm going to go off on that.
Yeah. So and here's the great thing: like we can agree to disagree on things, which is great, and that's what we're going to do in our next segment. But first, let's talk a little NWHL. Last week there were no games because of Thanksgiving break, but they are back starting tonight. Starting off real quick, though, we're going to look at the standings. The Metropolitan Riveters are a perfect 4-0 with 8 points in the standings. They're first place with 21 goals forward and 7 goals against. Next up is a tie for second place between the Buffalo Beauts and the Connecticut Whale. However, the Beauts actually have the tiebreaker over the Connecticut Whale. They're both 2-2-0. The Butte with 4 points in the standings. However, Buffalo has 13 goals forward compared to Connecticut's 9. But in an interesting note, the Buffalo Beauts have 17 goals against, where the Connecticut Whale have 12. And then in fourth place, you have the Boston Pride, who are 0-3-1 with 1 point in the standings. They have 8 goals forward and 15 goals against. A complete role reversal when you look at the last 2 seasons of the NWHL, where around this time, the Metropolitan Riveters are the 0-4 team, and the Boston Pride are the 4-0 team.
Well, maybe they need to take a page out of the Metropolitan Riveters playbook and get affiliated with an NHL team.
And joking aside, I mean, yeah, that's doing wonders for them.
Yeah, it is.
But at the same time, look at also Boston's roster compared to the last 2 seasons. They don't have any of the national team players, and Boston just lost another player. They lost Haley Skarupa, who is now in the U.S. national team residency program, which means there is a chance for her to be playing in the Olympics for the U.S. women's Olympic hockey team.
Very well deserved.
And Haley Skarupa, Rockville, Maryland native.
Very, very, very well deserved.
So
gotta love the Rockville representation. That's definitely.
Yeah. So right there, definitely from us to Haley. Congratulations, Haley. We hope that, you go to the Olympics, and we hope you win some gold for Rockville, Maryland, and for the NWHL as well, because, once all these, the Olympics is over, we could probably very well see a decent amount of them coming back to the NWHL, or at least we hope that we get to see them back in the NWHL. And then there was actually a suspension done. Buffalo's Maddie Ilya was suspended 1 game by the NWHL Player Safety Committee. They suspended her the other day on November 30th for 1 game for her actions during the team's most recent game on November 18th against the Metropolitan Riveters. Ilya will miss tonight's game against Boston in Boston. She received her suspension for spearing and butt ending. Spearing and butt ending Riveters defender Kelsey Colzer in 2 separate plays during the game. So. Ouch. And then we have the video right there, but we're not going to play.
No, we don't need the video of a spear to butt in.
But
just take your word. She did some stick work.
If you want to see more, go to nwhl.zone. There you go. But then also tonight, the NWHL action does come back into play. You can watch this on the NWHL YouTube page tonight at 7:30 p.m. when the Buffalo Beauts play in Boston against the Pride, and then tomorrow at 3 p.m. the Twitter game of the week, the Connecticut Whale are going to play the Metropolitan Riveters at the Barnabas Health House in Newark, New Jersey.
Good stuff.
So definitely good stuff there. And also a Connecticut Whale player that's not Anya Bottolino, our good friend, randomly followed the show on Twitter, and I've been talking to her, and we could be having a Connecticut Whale player on the show in the near future.
Cool.
So.
Well, Anya probably talked us up, so I mean, definitely works out.
And interesting, this person is a line mate of Anya's.
Good. So we can tell her our strength, tell Anya's strengths and weaknesses without Anya knowing about it until Anya listens to the show, and then they can have a nice little kumbaya meeting in the locker room talking about why they talked about it on the Experience Hockey Talk.
Yeah, it's just some show in Maryland. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. Now, hey, real quick before we get to the break, just want to touch base. AHL, Hershey and Lehigh Valley, they played last night. It wasn't very good for the Bears, but they did a little promotionals on the field for the outdoor game coming up on January 20th. It was funny seeing Chris Bork, Garrett Mitchell out there throwing the football around on their skates with their little skate guards, and Chris Bork got a nice little spiral game going for him. He is still leading the AHL in scoring with 9 goals and 18 assists for 27 points. So Hershey Stadium is going to be rocking and rolling on January 20th in the frozen tundra outdoors. So more to come on the Bears as we get through the course of the year. They're starting to get their act together. 9-10-3, 21 points, 6th place in the division. So they're starting to get healthy, but they also need to cut out some of the mistakes, just like the parent club.
Yep. And then real quick, in the NWHL, the leading goal scorer right now, or point leader right now, is Alexa Grushkow of the Metropolitan Riveters. And the wins leader is obviously from the Metropolitan Riveters, Katie Fitzgerald, with 4 wins. Yep. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back from the break. We're going to be doing some debating.
And some previewing.
Yeah, debating and previewing, yeah.
Too funny. Let's hit the trade first before
yeah.
We don't want to forget that thing.
That's right. I had the trade up on my freaking screen, and then I put it down. Why did I do that?
That's a good lead in. Anyway, that's good. We got the NWHL and AHL stuff out of the way before second break.
Oh, yeah.
So we can go.
I'm going to go to the Ducks page because it'll have the full trade. There we go. That's the full trade.
Oh, yeah.
Man, when I saw that trade, I was like, what? That's a big trade.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and did you see the thing about Zibanejad? Out indefinitely with a concussion.
Yeah, that's not going to help the Rangers.
And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Experience Hockey Talk, serious hockey talk for serious hockey fans. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, we want to always thank the bands Crimson Orchid and I Shine for the music that you hear coming into the show and during our commercial breaks. Really great bands, and it's a shame because I Shine is breaking up at the end of the year, and I think they're about to perform their last show together. So to Johnny Young Bosch, yes, that Johnny Young Bosch, the Black Ranger from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, to Polo, Ginny, and whoever their 50th drummer is now. Thank you for the good times, people. I've been to 2 of their shows, and they're an amazing band to see live, and so I'm deeply saddened that they're breaking up. But with breakups, there's great opportunity. And speaking of great opportunity, a couple players have some new opportunities now when center Adam Henrique and forward Joseph Blandisi and a 3rd-round pick in the 2018 NHL Draft were acquired by the Anaheim Ducks in a trade with the New Jersey Devils on Thursday for defenseman Sami Vatanen and a conditional 3rd-round pick.
Well, the thing is with Anaheim, they have been decimated by injuries on their forwards. Getzlaf's out, Raquel's out, Kessler's out. That's about 70 goals from last year out, just those 3 players. So bringing in Adam Henrique who's a very solid two-way player, gives them a little more speed. When they get healthy, that team's going to be ridiculous forward-wise. They might be able to flip a forward for a rental defenseman or two. But, I mean, Sami Vatanen was one of those guys that they were rumoring to move with all those contracts they have. Now they got everything kind of situated with Anaheim with who they're keeping in the future defensively with Cam Fowler and Josh Manson and those guys. But to move a Vatanen, I mean, another great move by the New Jersey Devils, who are feeling it right now. And it was an interesting tidbit that Henrique led the Ducks in ice time last night in Columbus, and Vatanen, for forwards, and Vatanen led the Devils in ice time against Colorado last night. So both guys integrating themselves quickly, and Henrique even had a nice assist on a goal by Roy in the second period against Columbus. So both guys immediately paying dividends for their new clubs.
Yeah, and an interesting note about Vatanen, who's 26 years old, so he's a very young kid still. He has 4 points, 1 goal, 3 assists, and a -6 rating in 15 games this season before the trade, and was third on the Ducks in average ice time at 21:06. He did miss the first 7 games of the season while recovering from off-season shoulder surgery. For Henrique, he has 14 points, 4 goals, 10 assists in 24 games this season. He was second among Devils forwards in average ice time at 18:15, including 2:54 per game on the penalty kill, also second among Devils forwards.
Well, I'm also glad that they got the auction off. He does a lot of things for Hockey Fights Cancer in Movember with his trademark mustaches he always grows, and they actually auctioned off
the mustache.
To the person to shave off the mustache at the party that he throws at the end of November every year, and I'm glad they got that all out of the way before he got traded. That would have been pretty awkward. It's like, yeah, by the way, the host of tonight just got dealt, so he won't be here to have his mustache shaved off. But he'll come back in 3 months when the Ducks come through town. That's if they haven't already. But definitely a good trade for both teams, and it'll definitely strengthen Anaheim. Once they get fortified back, they can make their push, because right now they are sitting 6th in the Pacific.
Yeah, and then now it is everyone's favorite thing, or probably will become everyone's favorite thing. Suspension debates. And first off, I mentioned this to you in text message. This is the major one that we agree to disagree, because
it's the biggest one.
It's the biggest one. I watched the Gudis play, because I mentioned to you, because I was in New Jersey at the time, so I wasn't able to really watch it, and I waited for the league's video to come out for it, and I watched it like 17 to 20 times, so I could really watch the play break down. The first thing I have a problem with is, why wasn't Matthew Perreault given a hearing or a penalty for cross-checking Gudis to the head? Because he does cross-check him in the head. He does knock off Gudis' head, which actually knocks Gudis off balance. That right there should have been penalized, let alone have a hearing for. Because that's the type of stuff you also want to get out of the game. That's number one, that thing I noticed. Number two, Gudis, as I said, had his helmet knocked off of him, and it covered his eyes, and it knocked him off balance. While, yes, you need to be in control of your stick, he did not even, once he did regain his vision, he never looked at Matthew Perreault. He kept looking at the boards at the play. He was never looking at Perreault at all. So he doesn't even know where Matthew Perreault is once he gets his vision back. And he's able to see where he is in that corner. So when he's bringing his stick down, yes, it was a bad motion, and he should have had more control with it. He didn't. You can clearly tell he's not trying to slash the guy, because he's not looking at him. He's paying attention to the puck and the play itself. I think it should have been 3 games with Perreault at least getting a hearing, and maybe a fine for his thing to the cross-check to the head of Radko Gudis, which actually sets off the entire set of the sequence of moments that happened in that play. Mm-hmm. And that is watching it several times, breaking it down, and really, and also listening to what they're saying in the video, too, about what Gudis also said. And Gudis even mentioned, he didn't do it on purpose. He was not trying to do that. He was trying to regain his balance and get back into the play. It was not a thing where he was trying to slash Matthew Perreault in the head. And no injury came out of it on either side of Gudas or Perreault at the same time. So at least we had that where no injuries were had.
Yeah, and I don't know what the Department of Player Safety is doing now, because I'll go back to the preseason when they suspended Tom Wilson for 4 games for a hit that he even said he wasn't even trying to go for the back of the numbers. And funny enough, you mentioned no injury. That guy came back in a couple minutes later and scored a goal in the preseason game, and they gave him 4 games, which was crazy. 4 regular season games, not preseason games. I mean, so with the 10-game suspension. What I saw, and like I said, I could be wrong, could be right. What I saw was a puck battle in the corner with 4 or 5 guys involved, Gudas and Perreault included. That he was, and I agree. So, they need to get some of this stuff out. Like, it's a tendency where the players are pushing against each other with their sticks instead of grinding and keeping their sticks on the ice. They have this tendency of putting it up near the chest area, and what I saw was Perreault lost his balance and the stick rode up into his neck area, which caused Gudas to lose his balance. And as he's trying to get his balance back, he's bringing the stick down almost like a samurai chop. Granted, it wasn't a full. If he did a full samurai chop, he'd been playing with Matthew Perreault's head as the puck. But but the thing is, that being said, stuff like that, it did look worse than it probably was. But at the same time, when you're watching replay after replay after replay, instead of the inconsistency of how they call these things at game speed. They kicked him out of the game for a match penalty for slashing.
Which at the time they should have done. Which that part is not up for debate.
Right.
It's the actual suspension part that is.
You knew that they were going to throw the book at somebody eventually. But George Parrish threw the book at him, and I almost thought it was going to be a 20-game suspension. They gave him 10.
But at the same time, though, there's also still this very inconsistent thing with this thing called repeat offender.
No.
There really is an inconsistency with it, and which also brings up, you bring up the Tom Wilson suspension. He had 4 games. Cedric Paquette got suspended 1 game for his hit to
Torrey Krug.
Oh,
I saw this one live.
And that one was a very bad one. 1 game. Tom Wilson, for something that wasn't as bad, got 4.
And the thing is,
and that's the thing. But because Cedric Paquette had no history, and we'll get to Gabriel Landeskog because he does have a history. Because he had no history, it was just 1 game. But hold on, Tom Wilson, yes, he has a history, but he did a less impactful hit, got 4 games. Cedric Paquette did a much more impactful hit from behind. Well, yes, Krug kind of put himself in the position, but at the same time, Paquette had enough time to lessen the blow or avoid the hit altogether. Well, he should have gone in 5 games for that.
The only reason why Tom Wilson had history is because of the dumb 2-gamer they gave him for the first hit in the preseason, which was, you could have called 2 minutes for interference on him, but nothing more than that. It was unfortunate the way he landed into the boards and he got knocked out of the game, but it wasn't an egregious hit by any sorts of manner. I'm not saying this because Tom Wilson's cap. I'm just saying, you got to have some sort of consistency, both on the ice, your officiating, still atrociously inefficient, but there's been some games recently where they've called it really well. But then there's still some that you're just like head scratching on what is and what isn't a slash. Some of the slashes they aren't called are the ones hurting players right now. The ones they are calling are pathetic. And with the Paquette hit, he didn't get kicked out of the game, and they evened it up because someone went after him. And they only gave him 2 and 2, and they gave Vetrano 2 and 2 for going after him. Cedric Paquette should have been in the locker room with a 5-minute major for hitting from behind in a game misconduct. I get that there's times where these players nowadays, these defensemen, are relying on, I'll just turn my back and control the puck on the boards instead of making a good skilled play and move the puck up the boards and get it out of the way so you get yourself out of harm's way. These defensemen are putting themselves in harm's way as much as the forwards that are coming in at breakneck speed.
I don't know why people are teaching them to do this. I was never, and I played defense for my team, but the number one thing that I'm always told to do is always look around your shoulder to see if anyone's coming. If anyone's coming, put yourself in a position to take the hit, not be hit and then get potentially injured.
Get back.
If I see somebody coming from behind me, I'm going to turn sideways so they can either hit me here in the chest or hit me here in the shoulder. I'm not going to let them hit me from behind. I do that as a forward all the time when I'm defending the ball in the offensive zone. Yes, my back is to them, but that's because I'm utilizing the wall in a different way. And I can have my back to the player because I'm using it to create space. But when I'm a defenseman in my own zone, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to try to make sure that I can move the ball faster than anything else because I don't want to get hit from behind. And I want to make the play to get the ball out of our zone and up into the offensive zone.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know where, and this is something that's really come up in the last 10 years that I've noticed. When they came back from that year-long lockout, I've really noticed that a lot more guys are doing that. And that's also a big reason why it's like a lot of these penalties and a lot of suspensions, honestly, shouldn't be called because they're putting themselves in the position for it. And it really creates a gray area for it as well.
That's where I think the Brian Burke hug rule that he has proposed several times would be something that can lessen a lot of this craziness.
Because that's what guys did to Bobby Orr all the time. When Bobby Orr's knees were gone, instead of guys plowing through Bobby Orr, they came up and they kind of hugged him like this and they kind of glided him to the boards because they didn't want to hurt him. And it's like that you got to kind of bring something like that a little bit back. And I agree with Brian Burke on that.
I mean, in a way, there is, of course, the gray area as well. I mean, you don't know how some of these officials are calling the game already. Now you're going to throw another little thing where, he was hugging him in the boards, or is that holding? It's just like the slashing thing. I mean, they're getting love taps on the ankle called, yet they're egregious ones that the hands aren't being called or being called inconsistently. It's just crazy and all that, but... let's get off the disciplinary and actually
we got one more, and that was Gabriel Landeskog, who does have a history, 4-game suspension for slashing.
Right.
But he has a history. He's served a 2 and a 3-game suspension in the past 2, and they do their history of repeat offenders based on 18 months.
Well, of course.
I think what they need to do is that if you've been suspended once or fined once, it doesn't matter how long it's been since that time. It stays there. There is no 18-month period. I mean, if you get suspended and then you don't get suspended and then you don't have a hearing again for like 6 years, okay, maybe you do some leniency there. But 18 months, which is a year and a half, I'm sorry. That's like, okay, if I be a good boy for a year and a half and then I do something, they won't do anything to me.
Well, also, when you're changing your Department of Player Safety head every 1 to 2 years, too, it doesn't help because everyone's going to have a different idea of how to call different things. You went from Colin Campbell to Stefan Quintal to George Peros.
Actually, no, Colin Campbell to Brendan Shanahan, Stefan Quintal, and then George Peros.
And there's 4 different players, 4 different types of players when they played. So
I would say this right here. And it's a great way to end the show tonight, because we have 5 minutes left.
I know. We've got previews to do, too.
With Paul Kariya kind of back in that limelight a little bit with the Hockey Hall of Fame. And it's now rumored that he's going to accept Anaheim retiring his number.
Finally.
And his number will go up in the rafters
Amen.
At the Honda Center in Anaheim. Could he potentially be somebody that would be willing, after this long hiatus he's had away from the NHL and hockey as a whole, because when he did the Hall of Fame Legends game, that was the first time he wore his gear since he retired. Could this be a great opening for a guy like Paul Kariya to step into player safety? Maybe a guy like Eric Lindros as well.
So we'll see.
That maybe those are the guys who really need to be put into those positions instead of. I mean, I like George Parrish. George Parrish is a very smart guy.
Yes.
He is very well college.
He had concussion problems too.
Yeah.
So
I think George Parrish is a wonderful thing. But could you imagine Parrish with Korea or Parrish with Lindros or all three of them together?
Oh, I mean, it doesn't preclude him to asking them for opinions and being like consultants almost, which I could see them more being apt to do instead of being locked down as being a representative and doing a desk job and all that stuff. But lots of crazy things coming this week. Caps have 4 more home games to get to, and the crazy thing about this is, I was looking at it last night, is we talk about the power play struggles. It ain't going to get any easier with including LA on Thursday night, 4 of the best 5 penalty kills in the league coming into town. Columbus is third at 84.8, San Jose second at 88.6, and Chicago fourth at 84.4, and the Kings are leading the league in penalty killing. They need to mix up their power plays, make sure that they aren't just constantly setting up in the 1-3-1. Tonight you got a great matchup with Bobrovsky and Holtby as the Blue Jackets come in for their first divisional matchup with the Capitals. You can't ask for anything more. And also, real quick, if you're going to be in Hershey on tomorrow at 5 o'clock, teddy bear toss. If you want to talk about great things with Hockey Fights Cancer, you don't see it in the NHL, but you see it in all the other leagues. The teddy bear toss is epic in Hershey. I have been there personally throwing teddy bears, and it's an awesome thing they do for the Children's Hospital.
To piggyback right off of that, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget we are on Patreon at patreon.com/TXHT_hockey. This past week's Patreon exclusive, which we put out for free for everybody, features Army Sergeant Kevin Gatson, who is also the captain of the USA Warriors bobsled hockey team, or sled hockey team. Bobsled. I don't know why I said bobsled. I'm tired. I'm sorry.
You're thinking, we're in the Olympics only a couple months away. But
it also featured Caps fans from 1974-75 season, day oneers, and it also featured Michael Marzucco from Nova Caps, because this was all filmed at the Nova Caps viewing party against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And it also features Jared Ronsky, the PA announcer of the Hershey Bears. And Jared is a really good guy, and he was talking about the teddy bear toss. And we also have a special guest on there, which you have to watch it only on Patreon, and it's a Patreon free exclusive, one of very few that we will do from time to time on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/TXHT_hockey. And a definitely big thank you to USA Warriors for allowing us to interview Army Sergeant Kevin Gatson. Definitely. Great guy to talk to. I love talking to him.
And definitely thank you for your service. Definitely will never be forgotten.
Yep. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, we have been the Experience Hockey Talk, serious hockey talk for serious hockey fans. And until next time, we will see you on the ice.